Introduction. It's a very great pleasure to be here. This is now my 25th Rotary talk, and I have to say you guys feed us very well, so thank you very much. As Brian said, I joined the Army in 2005 as a private in the parachute regiment. I did 2 years with Paris on tour. I was then very luckily promoted to go to Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, where I trained to be an officer. I commissioned into the Royal Gurkha Rifles. I spent 2 years in Brunei, and I finished my last tour in Afghanistan in October of last year. After 6 years in the Army as a private soldier, as an officer, this next clip for me particularly epitomises what a British officer should bring to the party.
Right, chaps, here's the joke. Someone's going to run up that gully, chuck a hand grenade through the slit, and take out that damn pillbox.
Well, I ain't going.
Chuck, where's your spot? I need somebody to run up the gully and take out the damn pillbox.
You bloody do it then.
Well, fuck off.
Yes.
Good idea.
Yeah, off like that, yeah.
Okay. Okay, a quick overview of what I'll talk about. We'll very briefly go into the history of Afghanistan, only back as far as the Soviet invasion. Talk about the current situation and conditions. Please bear in mind, obviously, it's now been almost a year since I was there. The enemy, who they are, who makes them up, ISAF strategy for dealing with them. The constraints, these are particularly close to the heart of any infanteer because it tends to mean we put ourselves more at risk. And what we perceive as the way out by 2014. At the end there should be a chance for summary and questions. However, I sort of tend to put the military hat back on when I'm talking now, and I sort of start talking in three-letter acronyms which nobody understands. So if I do that, please stand up and ask me what on earth I'm talking about. However, first of all, we obviously the requisite war porn.
Down again as we drive without friends, and on these longest days we spend all the time trying to pretend that our story could be true. Why dance and be cool? The saddest sunset days through. If only we knew, and we all sit round cheering our hearts down, listen to the waves as they all crash down, and watch the fires that slowly burns away. Glowing embers fly across the sky. Trace the sun across the sky, and till we cry. Always so hard to say goodbye. And we all sit round cheering our down. It's a good like this. These are times we'll miss the memories. I hope will never fade. Glowing embers flying across the sky.
Okay, Soviet invasion, 1979. You have a communist Afghani government in power. They're already fighting the Mujahideen, and they invite the Soviets to come into their country to help them with the insurgency. The Soviets come in and rapidly upscale their deployment. When you fight any form of counterinsurgency warfare, the only way that you win is by separating the insurgents from the population. The way the Soviets decided to do this was declare whole areas as no-go areas. So you've got down in the south here, and the Soviets said, right, anything moving in that area, whether it be man, woman, child, livestock, anything with a heartbeat can be shot on sight. They had packs of Hind helicopters roaming around, killing everything. Consequently, they had a huge uprising against them. The vast majority of the population wanted to help the insurgency and start killing Soviets. You ended up with 15,000 Soviets dead and 53,000 wounded. Now, we've been there for almost as long. We're looking at about 1,500 dead all told across all NATO nations. I'm not sure of the wounded figure, but it's nowhere near as much as 53,000. Soviets withdraw in 1989, leaving a power vacuum. During the Soviet invasion, because they declared all these areas no-go zones, you had families that had to emigrate or flee from these areas to go over to Pakistan. Now, Afghanistan traditionally is not a fundamentalist Islamic country. Pakistan is. You had these families of Afghanis, normally led by a 12 to 14-year-old boy because he wasn't old enough to fight, but the men always have to lead the families, go across the border into Pakistan, where they would find madrasas, or fundamentalist Islamic schools, and he had a whole generation of Afghan boys trained in fundamentalist Islam. Over the years of occupation, these boys then come back into Afghanistan, bringing this fundamentalist Islam with them. And this is how the Taliban come about. Taliban initially was a force for good. The story goes, Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, down south near Kandahar, where he comes from, a local warlord, because after the Soviets left, all these warlords just started fighting against each other. The Mujahideen just broke down and was basically had a bigger stick. But the local warlord came in, killed a lot of people, took 3 women with him, and went off. He had about 200 fighters. But Mullah Omar took 7 fighters and about 5 rifles and went after this warlord. And through a combination of religious rhetoric and military prowess, managed to hang the ringleaders and get these women back safe and sound away from these guys before they were raped. And that story spread like wildfire across the whole of southern Afghanistan. And thousands of people flocked to the Taliban's banner because they were sick and tired of the anarchy that was happening in Afghanistan after the Soviet withdrawal. Mullah Omar then just started marching northwards, and he'd come across a warlord and he'd turn around to them and he'd say, right, you will join me or I will wipe you out. And so he then created more people, more warlords would turn and become on his side, and they just keep going further and further north. Until finally they come up against the Northern Alliance in the top of the country, again, another band of warlords that were bound together, and they start fighting the Taliban pretty effectively. And this is why we're in Afghanistan. 9/11. After 9/11, Bush turns around to Afghanistan and Pakistan and says, right, you will expel Al-Qaeda, separate organisation to the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, the international terrorist group, from your borders. Pakistan says, okay, not a problem, or we will let you come in with your intelligence specialists and you can come and try and find them and get them out of our country. Afghanistan says no, knowing full well what Bush would probably do. And the reason they said no is because Al-Qaeda had sent 2 of their suicide bombers to kill the head of the Northern Alliance force. And they'd done that about 3 months before this. So the Taliban owed Al-Qaeda a blood debt, and the Taliban cannot be seen in any way, shape or form to be helping the Americans. Hence, we went into Afghanistan. Okay, Helmand Province. So we have the invasion. Now, the majority of the fighting is limited to Helmand Province, which is where the vast majority of British forces are, and up in the east, which is where a lot of the Americans are. The rest of the provinces are actually very benign. I have friends who are military officers who have travelled through Afghanistan in the past 4 years and not had a problem. It is just confined to 2 of these very volatile areas. Now, this is Helmand Province. This is an old map, but now the British area of influence, if you draw a line across this neck here, that is pretty much where the British area of operations is. I first went to Afghanistan in 2006. When we went there, We had 3,000 people, 3,000 soldiers who deployed to Afghanistan, but of that 3,000, only 750 of us were bayonets. Bayonets are people who get on the ground and do some fighting and hold ground. That is the area of England and Wales, and it's got a population of nearly 750,000 people. You're not going to control 750,000 people with 700 bayonets. It's just not feasible. And what we came up with was a strategy to create green zones, or the ink splotch strategy. Effectively taking Camp Bastion, which we have out in the desert, Goresh and Lash as our 3 points, and we would saturate those areas with troops, making sure that no insurgents could move or conduct any operations, and then we'd bring in loads of money and put loads of infrastructure in there and turn the population onto our way of thinking. Unfortunately, that's not the way it went in 2006. What happened was we turned up, and with hindsight we know now exactly what happened. We turned up and no one was shooting at us because it was time to harvest the opium, always is in March, April, and nobody wants to fight when that's going on. So we then spread ourselves across the whole of the province with only 700 fighters. Everybody stopped harvesting the opium and they started fighting against us. And all of a sudden we were surrounded in very small locations fighting for survival. Interestingly, now, 4 years later, and we've gone back to pretty much the original plan. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of people, expended a lot of ammunition and killed a lot of Afghanis before we realised that was what we should be doing. I'll quickly tell you about these places. Camp Bastion, this is an old slide. This is right in the middle of the desert, so it's actually a fairly benign place to live. We can see them coming from miles away. You've now got Bastion 3, which is down here, and that runway you could land Jumbo 747s on. You can pretty much fly in there from anywhere in the world. 15,000 people in that camp, varying nationalities. Your SAS are down there, that's where they launch their operations from, working with ours. You've got Americans, Danes, Brits, Canadians, all sorts. And it's a nice place to live. You've got air conditioning, tents, food halls. You've got someone who does your doby for you. You've got Burger King. You've got McDonald's. You've got the Indian takeaway. Very true. This is a main hub, and it's now very well established. So not a bad place to spend 6 months. Your only worry is you've got to work 7 days of the week. Lashkar, this is very much like Wellington is. It's the government capital, whereas Goresh is the economic capital. And this is where we put all our headshed as well. Brigade command is in here, so pretty much the command for the whole of Task Force Helmand. And unfortunately, this does get hit. Just before I turned up, Lashkar was hit by 200 suicide fighters. You had the brigade commander under his table with his helmet on. Brigade commanders don't like doing that. That's not what's supposed to happen. But they were very lucky. They pushed them away from the wall. But yeah, you've got all the heads of shed here. Again, a nice place to live. You've got someone doing your doby. You've got shower facilities. Most of your protections looked after by other people, so not a bad place to be. Goresh, this is where all the quartermasters live, and this is where all our supplies come through. Now, anyone who's been involved in the military will tell you where the quartermasters are, life is always very nice, because they always take hold of everything that's nice before it goes anywhere else. Again, a nice place to live. It's surrounded by desert, as you can see. We can see them coming from a mile off, so it very rarely does it get hit. And as I say, all the supplies go through there. Okay, CPs. This is where the mainstay of all the bayonets live, company patrol bases. Used to be very austere locations. And some of these places are getting a hit up to 5 times a day. Now that really starts degrading troops when you can't get sleep or you can't get downtime. You're still going out patrolling, you're coming back and your base is still being whacked. It tends to put you on edge. After 6 months of it, people get really combat fatigued. As I was leaving, these were becoming much nicer places to live. They started getting TVs into them, they started getting mobile showers, they started getting cooks down there. So they're getting to be nicer. But now we're going into putting in platoon outposts. What we're running, the new way of doing things now there is to try and put the same amount of troops on the ground, but in smaller numbers in lots more different locations. Trying to create the situation where you've got so many troops in different places that the insurgents can't do anything without one of our teams spotting them. The problem with this is, A, these guys are living in a austere location, so they can only do it for a minimum amount of time. They also put themselves at risk. Sergeant Puddin, he was on duty one night. Their section, the section's 8 men, had been told to occupy a compound. They were supposed to be there with 8 Afghan soldiers. The Afghan soldiers decided halfway through the evening they'd had enough and wanted to go back, which is what they do. And they went back to go and get themselves a decent feed. That left 8 guys in the compound, 4 of whom were given another task to go off and do an OP, an observation point on another compound, and left 4 people holding that compound. 3 of them slept, 1 of them on watch. Sergeant Puddin, thankfully, was on watch at about 2 o'clock in the morning. He was on the roof in the Sanger position, and he heard what he thought was scratching from the other side of the compound. He walked over to investigate, and the presence of mind to take the radio with him and his personal weapon, walked across and looked over the wall to see what he thought was a cow. But his night vision goggles down and saw 1 guy with a PKM and 1 guy with an RPG, that's a machine gun and a power grenade. Brought his weapon system to bear, riddled those 2. As he did that, 2 guys immediately beneath him digging an IED into the wall jumped up and ran off. Riddled those 2, and then all hell broke loose. He had about 20 different firing points from around the compound. Ran back to the Sanger position, which is the fortified sentry post, got on the general purpose machine gun and silenced all the firing points to the west. He then took the GPMG, radio, personal weapon system, tripod over to the other side of the compound to start shooting the other firing points. Kept shooting those, ran out of rounds from his GPMG, ran out of rounds from his personal weapon system, and looked down to see 2 people climbing up towards him from up the wall. Picked up the tripod, threw the tripod at one